Hello, Africa! Welcome to the Africa Desk Live. This platform was built for you. Not for governments, donors, or foreign interests, but for you, the African citizen who loves this continent, even when it breaks your heart. And here is your host, Semantics King Jr.
Well, welcome, folks. Welcome, Africa, from St. Paul in the state of Minnesota in the United States. This is the Africa Desk Live. 44 countries, 44 conversations once a week until we have sat with every single one of the 54 countries. Good afternoon to Lagos and to Abuja, to our brothers and sisters in Nigeria. Good afternoon to Kano, to Port Harcourt, to Cotonou, and to Accra. Good evening to Nairobi in Kenya, to Kampala in Uganda, to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and to Monrovia in Liberia. Good afternoon to Dakar in Senegal, to Abidjan in Ivory Coast, and to Johannesburg in South Africa. Good morning, of course, to the people of Minneapolis and St. Paul here in the state of Minnesota, to Brooklyn Park, where lots of Africans live, and to Atlanta, Georgia, to Houston, Texas, to Toronto, Ontario in Canada, and to Brussels and to London, and anywhere else an African heart is beating. I am Semantics King, your host, and this is episode 11 of 54 Conversations. And this week, today, we are in Nigeria. Welcome to Nigeria at a strange moment. And I want to be precise about why that is the case. By the measures that economists first reach for, Nigeria has encountered the second half of 2026 in better shape than it has been for years. The fundamentals, as they say, are the strongest in the long term. And yet, debt service is still swallowing something close to half of projected revenue. And yet, ask a household in Kano or in Ibadan whether life has gotten easier for them, and the answer comes back to no. So, the question for this hour is not whether Nigeria is stabilizing. The question is why stabilization on paper keeps failing to arrive in people's lives, and how much of that gap is an economic problem at all, as opposed to a problem of governance and accountability. Two Nigerian economists are going to help us take that apart. But before we bring them in, let's go around Africa and see what has been happening in the past week or so. We start with Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Equatorial Guinea and Gabon signed a joint engagement agreement at the African Union headquarters, setting out how they will actually implement the International Court of Justice judgment on their territorial dispute, the one handed down in May of last year. The union hosted the ceremony. The commission chairperson witnessed it. A special envoy was appointed to keep the two sides talking, and it worked. I want to sit on this for a second because we do not say it often enough. Two African states fought over territory, took it to court, and the court ruled that Equatorial Guinea owned the islands and ordered Gabon to pull its soldiers off them. Then both of them sat down and signed a framework for doing what the court said. Nobody had to be forced. Then we still are in Equatorial Guinea. 49 ordinary session of the African Union Executive Council opened on Tuesday and closed on Wednesday, with foreign ministers working through the union's agenda ahead of the mid-year coordinating businesses. It sits under this year's continental theme, which is water availability and safety sanitation. Unglamorous and closer to most African lives than almost anything else the union will discuss this year. And we move to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is Africa's largest lithium producer, and for years, almost all of that lithium left the country as raw concentrate for somebody else to add value to that. Last year, though, 1 point, 1.1 million tons of spotting concentrate went on out of the door, up 11% on the year before that. That is now changing though, because a 400 million processing plant in Zimbabwe, about 30 kilometers east of Harare, which is the capital, went fully operational in May. Then in April, Zimbabwe shipped Africa's first ever export consignment of lithium. This week, the mines minister stood in front of the plant and told reporters that the first lithium facility on the continent has been built in Zimbabwe. Harare had already forced the issue. On the 25th of February, the government suspended exports of raw materials, including lithium concentrate, pulling a planned January 2026 ban forward by about 10 months and halting cargo already in transit. It has since allowed limited exports on the quota, but only for products, producer rather, who can document and a commitment to build processing capability before the deadline. That is a hard policy to enforce and even easier one to announce. This week, however, somebody was able to walk a minister through the building. In Abuja, a joint African Union ministerial meeting in not Abuja, sorry, in Abidjan in Ivory Coast. A joint African Union ministerial meeting in Abidjan closed with a call for new and more inventive ways of financing the continent's industrialization, deeper capital markets, serious domestic resource mobilization, long-term savings put to work, and partnership with private capital. The number they were working against is roughly $400 billion per year by 2030. Hold on to that figure because our conversation this hour is about a country that cannot get its own revenue to reach its own citizens. The continental version of the problem is the same problem with more zeros. And then now to Abuja. African finance and trade ministers met in Abidjan last week under a single question. How does this continent pay for its own industrialization? They close with a call for deeper capital markets, serious domestic resource mobilization, long-term savings put to work, and partnership with private capital. The number they were working against is roughly 1.3 trillion per year by 2030. That is the scale of what Africa's economic transformation is estimated to cost. But the number I want you to hold is small, and it is the more uncomfortable of the two. Okay, estimates an organization from the UN estimates that the continent loses about $88.6 billion every year to illicit financial flows. Close to 3.7% of Africa's entire economic output is walking out the door. That is not money Africa needs to go and find. That is money Africa already earns and does not keep. Hold on to that because our conversation this hour is about a country that cannot set its own revenue to reach its citizens. I'm repeating that because it's very crucial. That was around Africa. And still, we have our two amazing guests in studio. They're ready to join us momentarily here. But before we do that, we like to do one more segment we usually do on the call. It is about independence of each of the African countries. So we take a look at some of those birthdays that happened last week and this week as well. The past Saturday, the 26th of July, Liberia turned 179 years old. And Liberia's date differs from every other on the calendar because Liberia was not decolonized. There was no empire to leave. In 1847, a settler republic on the West African coast declared its independence, and the world eventually recognized it. Happy independence to Liberia, 179 years. And today, the 1st of August, Benin marks 66 years. Benin, which was Dahomey then, and I want to be precise about that date because there are two of them and people mix them up. In December 1958, Dahomey became an autonomous republic within the French community, which is a self-rule, and self-rule is not sovereignty. Sovereignty came on the 1st of August in 1960. Today is the sovereign date. So happy Independence Day to Benin, all our brothers and sisters there. And they are not alone this week, though. Niger on the on the third rather, Burkina Faso on the 5th, Cote d'Ivoire on the 7th, all 66 years. All of them the same colonial arrangements in the same year within 9 days of each other. Four countries that left through the same door and have walked in four very different directions since then, which, as it happens, is exactly where this program is going next week. Hold that thought. Now we'll go back to the program. So, Nigeria. Joining me from Abuja is Ma Amara Ekeruchi. She is a senior research fellow at the Center for the Study of Economics of Africa, and her work sits squarely on the on the macroeconomic questions this hour is built around, about debt, about fiscal policy, and about what the national numbers do and do not tell us. So we'd like to welcome our sister live from Nigeria. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Semantics. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. And joining me from Lagos is Professor Bongo Adi, Professor of Economics and Data Analytics at Lagos Business School. His work lives at the point where economic policy meets institutions, which is to say, the point where a good idea either survives contact with the machinery of the state or it does not. Professor Adi, and I hope I'm pronouncing the word here better. If that, you correct me. Please welcome to the Africa Desk.
Thank you very much. Yes, you're very much on point if you pronounce it rightly.
Thank you. And for you in the audience, those who are watching us live, please drop your comments in the comment section. Please feel free to raise questions to either of our guests. We have them, they are the experts. I'm not. They will be able to answer some of your questions for you, but we ask of one thing of you. Please be respectful of our guests, and we will sort of delete your comment if you are very disrespectful. We respect everyone's opinion, but we also respect that you respect each and every one of us. This is the platform for Africa. It is for African citizens themselves to come to the show and talk about events affecting Africans on the continent. It's not for politicians, like you hear in the intro. It's not for political parties. We do not bring politicians on the show. We only bring them if we really need to, for them to answer to accusations against them. Other than that, the program is only for citizens doing the work on the ground. And the two amazing ones we have in Nigeria today are people we're very proud of, and we really appreciate your presence here this morning. Um, Before we go to our discussion here, um, I need to be able to say it and say it very clearly here. African citizens are so many on the continent of Africa, but there is a segment on the West Coast, which is the West Africa region. We will be having a discussion later after this hour on that, because Nigeria plays a critical role on the continent, but more so on the West Africa region. It is important that this discussion is really about Nigeria and about its influence on the sub region, sub West Africa sub region. So thank you. Let me start with you, Ms. Ekeruchi. Let me ask you simply, and please, maybe a simple answer here will be fine for you. When people say that Nigeria's fundamentals are the strongest they have been in years, what exactly are they pointing at? Name maybe some things, if you will, and then tell me whether those are the right things to be measuring at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Semantics. Very great question. Um, so, if we recall, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, we recorded negative growth rates. We experienced a recession, actually. Um, and this is, this wasn't specific to just Nigeria. A lot of countries across the world experienced recession. But for us, because we're commodity dependent, considering that there was very little demand for oil for an extended period of time, that affected our economy. Fast forward after COVID, then came the Russia-Ukraine war. That also affected food prices, fertilizer prices, and then we've also had, changes in the U.S. Federal Reserve rates, which has affected, borrowing costs. Um, and then, even after that, more recently, we've had global volatilities, whether it's with regards to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which has affected trade dynamics. or with regards to the conflict in the Middle East. And so all these put together, this series of events, it seems that we are now in a safe zone. So current economic growth rate is at 4%, not overly significant, but compared to the growth rate, say, post 2020, I would say it's commendable. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is with regards to inflation. So for an extended period of time, we were experiencing a significant and rapid increase in the price of commodities, and in particular in the price of food, so food inflation. And inflation has been tapered down. Um, Again, inflation isn't it isn't say single digits or even in the tens region. It's in the 20s region. I think late 20s or high 20s. So, but to an extent, that rapid increase in the prices of commodities has been checked. So that's for the two key macroeconomic indicators. And then we've also had some reforms that have been deemed successful. However, I defer to the kind of reforms that we've implemented, but we've unified our exchange rates to an extent. We've also removed subsidy removal on petrol or fuel prices. So those are some of the reasons why um, experts have said that we are out of the woods. And yeah.
We're going to detail to see whether those numbers really reflect the reality on the ground. But I'll go to Professor Adi here. Same starting point for you, but different angle. Take a policy that has been announced in Abuja and is genuinely well designed, Dr. Adi. Walk me and my audience through what has to happen for that policy to reach a household, say in Ibadan, every step, and tell us roughly where is that walk usually falling over? Is it falling over in the right direction, or is it falling over in the wrong direction, Dr. Adi?
Well, thank you. That's quite a difficult question to answer because, they say that the road to hell is lined with good intentions. Yeah? So Nigeria kind of typifies, that saying. We always we have very beautiful policies, just as Ma has clearly enunciated. So, and in the past 3 years, we've actually seen the most ambitious of reforms, in our living memory in Nigeria. So, removal of fuel subsidy and quasi-liberalization of the foreign exchange market, which has led to improved reserves. So the foreign reserve, which is actually the leading indicator for external observers, has nudged up significantly to levels that we've not seen in about close to 17 years. So I think that singular indicator is why everybody is saying that Nigeria, as Mma put it, is out of the woods. The question you asked me is about transmission, policy transmission. So where lies the gap? Why is it that policies that are well-intentioned, made in Abuja, kind of get lost in the woods, not able to make it to the people? I think that question borders on institutions, borders on structure, on the structure of the system, and I think it's a political economy sort of question. So my approach will be political economy in orientation. What sort of political economy do we operate in Nigeria, or do we witness in Nigeria? Because answering that will help us come to terms with, to understand that gap, the existence of this transmission chasm. So let me say that Nigeria runs a multi-party democracy on paper, but the political economy is more of compensation, compensation system, compensation-based networks. So when someone wins the election, so the next thing is to appoint those who are close to him, those in his or her party, those who align with his or her own interests, and that is how the coalition begins to build up. Okay, so and that determines what gets done in the first place. So let's say we have a portfolio of different reform options. Okay, so the ones that get chosen may not always be the optimal, but the ones that first are of interest to the ruling coalition. That's number one. The second one is the one that will benefit them the most. Okay, and then another thing to consider would be the one that they find, comfortable to implement. Some options may have more impact, but then they will not be chosen simply because it doesn't really satisfy, the interests of the ruling coalition.
But it's supposed to be for the interest of the citizens, not just the ruling coalition. It's supposed, that's why you're elected for.
So that is why I said that it is a coalition-based politics. It's an alliance. And you're not a member of the alliance, you don't expect to get much out of it. Let's start from there. Okay? So I think we need to be a bit critical here. Let's start from the last administration before the current one. So in that administration, one of the major critics, I mean, I'm sure that you are following events in Nigeria. One of the major critics of that administration was that it was largely nepotistic. Okay, it favored just one segment of the country, and even that segment, just a very narrowly constructed elite. Okay, so some people will tell you that it amounted to state capture by a certain segment of the elite. Okay, so, and that, of course, disenfranchised people. I remember those days, there was this popular phrase people use, 97% versus 5%. Of course, it didn't add up to 100%, but that was actually something that I'm sure you probably had that. The president of the day used that.
Yes.
Okay, so if you're not part of the 97% or so you have 5%, you get nothing. And even the 97%, perhaps only 5% of the 97% got anything. So then that was the the emergence of a highly polarized system. Society became fragmented, and not just fragmented, but also polarized. And then, and in economic terms, inequality became something of a major concern. Okay, and whenever you have high levels of inequality measured with a Gini coefficient or something, the Lorentz curve, you see that the tendency for the system to boil over, for crimes, for secessionist tendencies, and struggles, all of that, non-state activism, become very strong. And that's what we've witnessed. So it's good to go back in time. And then so some segments, felt that they've been cut out, okay, of as they call it, the dividend of politics. Okay. Now, when the new administration, the current one, when they got in. So the mantra is, it is our turn. I hope you understand that, because that is why I said we have to go the political economy way to understand what is going on in Nigeria. So now it is our turn. In the vernacular, they say it's Emiloko. That's a Yoruba, it is my turn. So it's not actually our turn, it is my turn, right? So if you're not a member of that inner circle, okay, you're not part of it. Okay, so this is what we have seen. And when you have a government filled up with your men, so you only hear what you want to hear, sycophants and all that. Okay, so everything, so the state capture that I referred to earlier has reached a very high crescendo as it is today. So when the state has been captured, if you're not a member of the ruling coalition, you get nothing. And that is why on paper you will read that they have released so much fund for all manner of social safety nets, social support, and then when you ask the people who received this, you probably will not know anyone who has received anything. Okay, so I often carry out this simple survey in my classes. Who knows someone who has benefited from? Okay, so the way we kind of rub it off is that, okay, because we are all very high above the poverty level, perhaps we wouldn't know what is going on below the line. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, on paper they claim to have released so much money, but nobody says it. To buttress that point, just the other day, within this week, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria paid a visit to the president to tell him that the poor are not breathing, okay, that the poor are suffering. But the president disagreed with them. They told him that the reforms are hurting the poor. The president disagreed with them. So they came out, okay, kind of frustrated. Okay, so if you listen to the leader of that delegation, one of the archbishops, he said that, well, what was clear is that the president didn't agree with them and they didn't agree with the president. So it is important to put this in perspective, because the churches seem to be at the grassroots and they seem to feel the pulse of the people. So when they go to the president to tell him that the people are suffering, and the president is saying, no, the economy is doing well, and the reforms are working. We never said the reforms have not worked. But what we're saying is that, the people are yet to feel the impact of this reform. So the president seems to disagree with everybody, meaning that he seems to believe what he wants to believe and what his sycophants are telling him. So you can understand. So that is the way we can begin to understand. So this is a kind of a coalition thing. If you're a member of the coalition, you tend to be singing the praises of the president, and then you will be praising the reforms to the high heavens. But if you're not, and okay, so if I bring it down to data, so you can also see that in the data. What is driving the growth of the GDP is the non-core components of the GDP. Okay, so what are the core components? Core components of GDP are private consumption and private investment. Okay, now everything begins to make sense if you understand what I'm talking about. So private investment, private consumption, they've been stagnated. But then you see an explosion in government spending, and of course, because of the stability in oil price, which has been stable, above the budget baseline.
Yeah. I think we may have lost the professor there, if you can hear me. But while we have him, I'll get back. Mama, do you agree with what the professor was saying there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are lots of political, economic issues that hinder the transmission of these reforms. from reaching the common citizens, i.e. us. That's one. Also, personally, I don't, okay, I think the professor is back.
Yeah, you can finish your thought. I'll go back to the professor. Go ahead.
I'm back. I don't know if you can hear me now.
I can hear you now. Yeah, hold your thought there, Professor.
Okay.
Ma was bringing the point, sort of agreeing with you there.
Okay.
So let her finish her thought, then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second is for some of these reforms, for instance, the unification of the exchange rates and also the subsidy removal. These are orthodox economic policies that, in my opinion, have been phased out. So, first is, yes, the political economic issues hinder the positive impact on citizens. And then second, some of the reforms, in my opinion, are no longer viable.
That's good to know. But if the reforms are no longer viable, why don't, I mean, Nigeria is so rich with the human resource ability. We have all the experts there. We have the government there. There's no shortage of professors and doctors and people who have the expertise. Why can't they change those policies to make sure that the people are really having a better life? Nigeria is so huge with all the resources, and there are lots of Nigerians who do not feel that that kind of enormous power, financially speaking. Why can't they change the policies? Why can't the government change those policies to make sure that Nigerians get a better gain for the result of the elections? They voted them in. They voted you in to give them result, Professor Adi. Why can't the policies be changed? I think we're having a problem with the
Can you hear me?
lines. Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I'll still toe the lines of political economy. Why can't the system be changed? Why don't we reform in a way that is favorable to this larger citizenry? You know, as they would say, let's have the larger good for the larger parts. Yeah, it's easy to say, but it's quite difficult in practice. Again, because of the nature of political coalitions and alliances. All right. Now, Nigeria, like you rightly pointed out, we are not short of competent human resources.
Right.
Right. But so the question is, why is it even when the best of us? So I wouldn't even excuse myself or Ma. We may find ourselves in government tomorrow, but then our actions may not be significantly different from those of the people who have been there because of the structure of the system. Okay, so Ma has pointed out, okay, how orthodox policies that have been phased out, been imported hook, line, and sinker. We have a system whereby the center tends to determine everything. I will take you to the National Assembly today. Okay. The National Assembly, this is not the first time. It's been like this since, it became worse or more rampant since the last administration, whereby you now have the two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, populated by your men. Okay, people who cannot question the plans of government. So, part of the reason the Catholic Bishops' Conference went to the president is that they are against one-party state. So what we've seen is the collapse of civil society that has been completely silenced in Nigeria. So there is no active opposition. If you go to the parliament, it is filled with people, rubber stamp, Okay, all they do is just to pass, all the whatever the president or their party brings to them. Nobody criticizes, nobody critiques, nobody challenges. And why is that the case? All right, so it is a political economy of, some people call it prebendalism. Some people say it's cronyism, but I would say, like somebody wrote, Bayard said, politics of the belly. Okay, so the state controls everything, controls the revenue. Okay, so you will hear often that we were not actually structured as a democratic state. So our constitution was bequeathed to us by the military. So the cry of everybody has been on this fiscal federalism. Okay, can we, how do they put it? Redistribute powers to the constituting elements, the regions or the states. It is only right now, in recent times, that we've seen something like electricity. Okay, taken from what they call the concurrent list. Okay, where the government has ultimate. It doesn't matter where you are. If you produce, generate electricity, you have to, will it to the national grid, right? But it is only recent times that has been reformed. Now states can produce their own electricity, and we've seen some states taking advantage of that to improve electricity generation in their various states. So the challenge that we have is structural and constitutional. And until we change that structure, find a way to change the constitution, then, we will all be speaking as we're doing every day. Now, the challenge to doing that is that, again, hold on, that people will campaign, okay, and have it in their manifestos that they will change the constitution, they will do this, they will regionalize, they will devolve powers to the units. But when they get there and begin to enjoy the perquisites of office, they don't remember it again. Okay, and everybody wants to be part of the sharing. So because of that, you see you win election in Labour Party, the next day you join APC, right? Everybody wants to part of the sharing of the national cake, as they call it. So it becomes, like I said, coalition. You are not part of it, you are not part of it. So they don't care about the poor. Okay, the poor is an afterthought.
Wow. I'll bring a question later here, but I want to ask here, maybe I'll let you to come in. If you take these same numbers, because there seems to be something here, because all the conversation I've been having with each of the countries, there's something happening almost around the same country. But if you take those same numbers that Nigeria has right now, on paper, they look really good. If you take those numbers and flip it and give it to a different African country, will the citizens feel the benefit of those numbers, or will it be the same as it is in Nigeria? I'll start with you, Ma.
Great question. I think it depends on the African country you give it to. For African countries with better efficiency in governance, where there is cross-sectoral collaboration, there's information and knowledge sharing across ministries, where there is the political will, where there is strong and credible political leadership, where there is transparency, where there is accountability, I think you will get better results. So I'll give a few examples. Budget padding, I don't think it happens in all 54 African countries. Heightened inefficiencies in government spending, I also think it varies from one country to the other. Tax evasion, tax avoidance. The data shows that actually Nigeria ranks, among the least on the continent. So there are countries that are able to better mobilize resources domestically. So it's how do I put it? It's proven. The data proves that. Why would a citizen be willing to pay tax when, to an extent, that tax revenue may or is more likely to go into the pockets of a public office holder. So those are the, I think, with even with our with the level of financing that we've been able to mobilize, I think if we give it to a more to countries that have these criteria or these factors that I listed earlier, I think they may be able to do more with what we have.
Professor Adi, the same question to you. Would say take the same numbers here and give it to, say, South Africa, maybe, or even Senegal, because these countries are doing well. A couple of weeks ago, we had a professor from South Africa who was saying the same thing you two are talking about: corruption in government, and this happening there and that happening there. If you give it to a different African country, maybe slightly differently, but would the numbers be different? I hear what Ma is saying, but don't Nigeria have the political will? Don't they have the institutions in place? Don't they have the right people in place to make sure that these numbers really work for the people of Nigeria?
Okay, so I think Ma has answered it very brilliantly. The first one, you talk about, don't they have the right people? Don't they have the structure? Don't they have the institutions? So let us take it there, one after the other. Do we have the right people? Yes, we do have the right people. Do we have the political will? I think that's difficult to answer. Right?
And why is that so?
Why is it difficult to answer? Yeah, so why is that difficult to answer whether we have the political will? It's kind of complex because I can't say that they don't have political will, right? They have the political will, but what you find is that we have an insular system. Okay? Again, I'll go back to the constitutional problem, the structural problem that we have, because most of the challenges that we have when it comes to governance and leadership are induced by the structure of the system. Okay? We have the federal system, you have the federal government, then you have the subnational government, the states, and then you have the local government. So 3 tiers of government. Now, if you listen very well, the conversation that we've had, everything that Ma and I have said, borders on the federal. We rarely mention the states.
Yep.
And you can never talk about the local government because it doesn't exist. Wow. It exists only on paper. Right? And that is the government, the arm of government that is closest to the people. Okay? Now, let's go back to the structure I was talking about. I'll go back. I was saying something about core GDP and non-core GDP. Let me reconcile all that. So, private consumption, private investment, stagnant. But government expenditure has ballooned in the last couple of years. Each of the subnational entities, the states, okay, have seen their allocation from the federal accounts, okay, increase by some more than 100%. So a state that used to have 2 billion naira today receive as much as 5 billion in a month. But the question is, what are they doing with it? Okay. Now the state is built in such a way that nobody, in fact, apart from Lagos and perhaps Abuja to some extent, where you may have some bit of critical elite who can ask questions, where the media, the fourth estates, where they are concentrated, they write, they query. But if you go to the states, nobody knows what is going on in the states. You wouldn't tell me what's going on in Zamfara State, where Mama and I cannot tell you. So go online, you may not even have, I mean, insecurity and all that. You may not even assess those states. So nobody holds those, the national, subnational, nobody holds them to account. Right? Because of the structure. This is the beginning of the month. Maybe by next week, the governors will be coming back from Abuja, where they have gone to collect their allocation for the month of July that ended, because that is the only time they will pay salary. Okay? That does not create incentive for the states to even build, develop, or find alternative ways to increase, ramp up their internally generated revenue. Because everybody is depending on the federal because of the structure. So you understand that. So when you talk about political will, the president at the center may be doing his best, but the governors at the subnational level, do they also share the same vision? I think that is a question that we need to answer. I don't know the answer to that question because, again, so you go down to the local government level, which I said exists only on paper. Some states, there is no local government election. The election is not competitive. It is the governors, appointing and then making it look like there was an election whereby they select those they want to be in all the local governments. So, like I said, this is about coalition. It's a coalition system.
If that's the case, Professor, if that's the case, then is federalism a curse or a blessing in the context of Nigeria?
I think it's a curse.
Why so?
Yeah, I think that's everybody has been. So you see the difficulty in changing the constitution again because of the federal system. You have to bring everybody, to the table to negotiate, to agree. We came very close during the administration of Jonathan, where he convened the what do they call that, assembly, and then they came up with very brilliant recommendations, but that never got implemented to today. So, we know what to do. Okay, because when it comes to governance, when it comes to economics, it's all about incentives. If you have a system that generates the right incentives, then people have no choice than to do what you call it incentive compatibility. Right? But if you have the wrong system, then it will continue to generate perverse incentive. So this is so it's kind of it's a difficult. I think it's a difficult one. So if we don't get the system, we will get more. We don't get the system right, we'll be getting more of what we have always got.
Thank you.
So this is where we are, and that's why So I can't answer the question whether it's political will or because not. We don't have the right institution or because we don't have the right people. It's beyond that.
Thank you so much. If you're just joining us online, audience, you are in conversation. You are watching the Africa Desk Live. This is a episode 11 of 54 Conversations, where we're in Nigeria today. Nigeria is always stated as being a superpower in Africa. It's a giant of Africa. And here, the professors, the expertise who are telling us about what is happening there. Please, if you have questions for our guests, please drop your questions in the comment section. If you agree with them, please let us know. If you disagree with them, let us know. We'll read those questions to them later. The professor was explaining the problems we're having in Nigeria, and I'm thinking, and I'm just looking, those numbers that they gave out there, if the reality on the ground is different, who is it meant to sway? When you look at international institutions like maybe the IMF and other institutions praising Nigeria's reform and saying, oh, everything is looking good, in terms of the reforms, when the reality on the ground is different, who is the praise for? Is it for investors to signal to them that you can come and invest in Nigeria? Or is it a claim about Nigeria's life that is so unpredictable?
Okay. So I would say the praise is probably targeted first at the ruling class, so the presidency and the public office holders. And it's also no surprise that the World Bank and the IMF are commending the government, because these reforms are ideally Bretton Woods institutional reforms, right? So subsidy removal, austerity, unification of foreign exchange rates, and what have you. Um, that being said, like I said earlier, these reforms generally need to be adapted or tweaked or adjusted to the context, right? In a country where 1 in 3 people are living in extreme poverty, subsidies to an extent becomes important, you know. In a country that is import dependent, um, you know, unifying the exchange rate may not be the best way to go, right? So reforms have to be adjusted to the local context. And so that's one point. The second point is that, you know, the for most parts of the world, countries have moved away from these Bretton Woods recommendations. Countries are now adopting country-specific recommendations, right? Or regions, for instance, the Asian countries that have significantly, grown and developed in the last couple of decades. Those are the reforms being implemented or that was implemented were specific to their region. Yes. And there's one more thing I would like to highlight. Earlier, I said that inflation was in the high 20s. It's actually in the low 20s, 23%. So that's what another thing I would like to highlight. It's not as low as we want it to be. Hopefully, more work can be done in that area.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment, Professor Adi. Who should we, as other Africans, even though we may not be directly in Nigeria, but whatever happens to Nigeria is it's impacting other Africans because of the role that Nigeria plays on the region. Who is accountable? Who should we actually hold accountable if a policy in Nigeria fails to reach the household? It's not who's to blame, who is accountable.
Well, direct question, direct answer. Everything rises or falls on leadership, so they say. So it's all about leadership. So who is the president of the nation? Okay. You see, there is something that we saw in Nigeria in 1999. We saw a president who was responsible, who took it upon himself to lead the change. And I'm speaking about President Olusegun Obasanjo. Okay, the first thing he did, he made sure that he assembled the right caliber of Nigerians, to walk the talk with him, and to buttress that point. After that, after their regime and the regime that succeeded him, those individuals have gone on, to climb higher, in international, at the international level, whether you're talking about Adewumi Adesina, who just stepped down as the AFDB president, or the current WTO the chair lady, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Name them. He got the best people. Okay, and Nigeria was actually, in fact, we really escaped. We nearly escaped. Yeah. Okay, in those years, we registered consistent growth above 6% for a decade. That was no mean feat. Right? But all of that collapsed when we now change leadership. Okay? People who had little understanding of the imperatives of growth in the modern economy. Okay? So appointments were based, I mean, I've already cited the evidence there.
Yeah.
And in the current administration, here we've got a few. But then, is the president really leading the charge? My answer is unequivocal and unambiguous. No.
So the buck stopped with the president.
No. So let's take it in Africa, the countries that are doing well. Okay, whether you're talking about Rwanda or the Moroccans or the Tunisians, okay, you see Paul Kagame. I remember the time when Paul Kagame was in Nigeria every week. Okay, for every international conference. In fact, even to the point of workshops, he was here. What was he doing? Appealing to Nigerians, looking for investors. He was directly involved. And we've seen how that effort has transformed the Rwandan economy today. Same goes to other, high-performing economies in Africa. So if you do not have a proactive president, okay, who can convince the people? Because that's important, right? You need to inspire. You need to motivate. You need to really command the people to follow you. I think that's been missing in Nigeria in the past since 2015.
Wow. If the president were listening to you now, or his ministers or his officials, any of them, they could listen to, they may not be watching us live, but they could watch it later. Someone could forward them a clip of you, because after the show, we produce clips that we produce, and send them around. If he listens, if he's going to be listening to you, Professor Adi, and maybe even you, Ma, and then he sees your clip, what would you tell the president directly, Professor Adi?
I will tell the president to get more involved in governance, because from all indications, he seems to be aloof. Yeah.
What about you, Ma? What will you tell the president?
Okay. So in addition to what Prof said, country-led leadership, I would also add context-specific reforms.
What does that mean?
It means don't do copy and paste. Yes.
Wow.
Even if a development partner has recommended a reform, you have to be observant on how the impact of that reform will play out on your citizens. The structure of our economy is unique. Our systems, our institutions, our incentives, they're unique, they're specific to us. So we can't adopt, one size fits all reforms. No. No.
I know we are running out of time, but I'll still be respectful here of your time. But I still have a few questions for you. Somebody is actually surprised by the comment you made. But is there any? I mean, I understand it from the show we've been having. We've been going from one country to another. This is the 11th episode, so we've gone to South Africa, Nigeria. I mean, not Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Rwanda. We had a Rwanda show here. It was an epic. We are seeing the same thing permeating: corruption here, corruption there. The government is there. The government is that. It's happening. Is there any place at all in Nigeria that works? Any place at all? We heard about the state level that nothing works there, but is there anywhere else within Nigeria that works? Whether it is, maybe a program, maybe some sort of township, at the federal level, maybe. Is there any place at all in Nigeria where something actually works for the people and they are seeing the benefit of that? I'll start with you.
You want me to start?
Yes.
Yeah. So Abia State is working. Enugu State is working. So let me stop there.
So why are they working, but in other states are not working?
Because you've got people who are vested in the development of their states. So you've got the governor who is leading the charge. Okay, he's not subletting anything to anybody. He's on the front line every day, and you see that. Something in Enugu, right? He understands it. He critiques whatever is going on. He's on top of things. Yeah, so I can speak for those, for those two states. Maybe there will be others, but these are the ones that I am confident to speak about.
Thank you. What about you, Matt? Do you notice anything else, anything that works? Probably a program. I saw one of your videos. You were recently in Abuja. You were talking about some economic issue. I mean, numbers there and thing. Is there any place in Nigeria that worked for you? Any program in any city, in any township? I mean, I understand that it's difficult, it's challenging, and so, but still, there must be something working out that you've observed. Is there any place that is working for you in Nigeria?
Absolutely. So in addition to some states, I would say the private sector. Nigeria's private sector is doing amazing. So for instance, in finance, banking and finance, we have several of our banks that are spread across Africa and even, outside of Africa in Europe. That's significant. We also have industrialization pathways opening up. Of course, the Dangote refinery. I think that's significant as well. We also had innovations in tech. Nigeria alone has a couple of unicorns.
Yeah.
From Flutterwave, and what have you. I think that's significant. And then in addition to the private sector, one sector that I would like to highlight is entertainment. Yes, Nigeria's entertainment, our ability to shape culture across the world.
Yes.
That is a niche that we have hacked, whether it is Nollywood or whether it's our musicians or whether it is our fashion designers or even food. That is the niche that we have been able to hack. And the common thread across these areas that I have mentioned is innovation, creativity. Yes. So there is a place for the government, no doubt, but the private sector innovation, if they are being supported, if they are not over-regulated, if there is no policy somersaults, there's predictability in the regulatory system or the regulatory sphere, we've seen significant progress being achieved in these areas.
We are almost close of time here, but I still have maybe two more questions for each of you, and please help me understand something here. If I'll start with you, Professor Adi. Please name one thing, just one thing. I know we have a lot of things that need to be done in Nigeria, but one thing, if it is changed in the next 12 months, would actually show up in an ordinary Nigerian household budget, and it would be positively impacting people in Nigeria. What would that one thing be? And tell our audience, to watch out between now and 2027 to see whether that thing actually is working for the people. What would that one thing be?
Well, I would say infrastructure largely, but if I can single out a class, it would be electricity. Okay. If there's an improvement in electricity, right? Nigerians, just as Ma pointed out, Nigerians are very creative, highly innovative. Okay, despite all this, in fact, they innovate around the difficulties. Okay, so now begin to imagine if we have that enablement with electricity energy, they will do wonders, right? So we have done much, taking the bull by the horns when it comes to fintech, entertainment, and the financial services industry. So if the ordinary Nigerian could really get a sense that the government is behind them, they will do wonders. Yeah, most Nigerians don't wait for the government, actually.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. The professor indicated energy, that he thinks once energy is really focused on, it will make a lot of impact on Nigerians. What do you think? What one thing you think needs to be done that would change the lives of Nigerians tremendously?
Okay. So, in addition to electricity, I would say food and fuel reforms in those two sectors.
Mm,
Um, the household budget is majorly shared between electricity, food, and fuel transportation costs. So, making fuel available, at a more affordable rates. Again, hopefully okay, so the Dangote refinery has reduced fuel prices on the ground to an extent, but there's more room or more room for improvements, or more room for reductions actually in the fuel
mm,
price. And then for food, um, you know, uh, conflicts in food producing regions, um, uh, issues surrounding ownership of land, difficulty in obtaining farm inputs, whether it's fertilizer or what have you, lack of mechanized farming, transportation to markets, lack of storage facilities. There are a host of issues that affect food supply and in turn, raise the prices of food. So reforms that would drive down the prices of food and fuel, yes, I think that will positively impact households.
mm. There are lots of Nigerians living almost on any part of the planet. You go to Canada, there's a lot of them there. I know a couple there because I live in Canada before. In the USA, there's a lot of them. In the UK, Australia, like I said, literally, there is not a single part of the world you would not see a Nigerian. And there's a reason why they live in, many of them. So my question to you before I ask the final one, what would you say to a young Nigerian woman or man, or even a grown up who is deciding this year whether to stay in Nigeria and build his life there or her life there, or leave Nigeria for somewhere else to go and build their life there to a better life? What would you say to them? I'll start with you, Professor Adi.
I don't think there's anything bad
Mm,
in people going to other lands.
mm,
Um, Yeah, so because in the world in which we live today, you can't really cast all your eggs in one basket. Yeah,
that's true.
I would encourage. In fact, I actually tell the young people
Mm,
that I teach in class, if you are 18 in Nigeria,
mm,
you should aspire to have global experience,
mm,
right? Because the system here doesn't really allow you to exercise flexibly your
mm,
God-given abilities.
mm,
So you need to go hone your skills. Then when you have done that, you can come back.
mm,
All right. I think that is more beneficial. And then when you say that you have so many Nigerians in Canada, in all over the world,
mm,
what about the Chinese? They're all over the world as well. What about
mhm,
the Indians?
mhm.
I don't think that we compete with those people in terms
No,
of
no, no. But
their
my point
population,
here is,
diaspora
my point,
population.
Professor, is
Yeah.
that
So yeah,
with the human resource Nigeria has, if
yes,
all those expertise were in Nigeria, I mean, you can stabilize in Nigeria, then come and go back. Nigeria will be better than it is today. But there are still young people who thinking, oh, because of the same issues you just raised, oh, there is issues
yeah.
here. They want to leave, or should I build my life here in Lagos or Abuja, or should I just travel outside?
Again. So what am I going to say to that? Um, Young people should seek opportunities wherever they
Mm,
can find it.
mm.
If it is Nigeria, so be it. If it is out of
Okay.
Nigeria and they
Mm,
can legitimately seek such
mm,
opportunities,
mm.
it is all for the betterment of Nigeria. And
Yeah,
besides, okay, so most of the talents, I mean, in Africa, we don't have all it takes to develop our human resources
that's
to the
true.
optimal level.
Yeah.
Okay, most of us, I mean, I lived for 10 years in Japan, and I'm sure that
Mm,
Mma could have gone abroad to
mhm,
get better education,
mhm.
right? So we need our people to be exposed to that, especially in this world of high-end technologies.
Yeah.
We need to get that, all right?
Mm,
So when we have acquired that, then we can come back. I
okay.
think that's the growth model of countries like Japan. I know during their Meiji Restoration, they went, In fact, the government went looking for the best young people,
Yes.
their best and brightest, and they send them to all the best universities in the world. And when they finish, they bring them back. And the same thing is happening with China, with India, and so many of the countries. So I don't have any problem with that, but they have to seek legal ways to, go acquire, advance, improve their human resources, and get back home. That's
good.
That's what I would say. I have
That's
nothing against that. Yeah.
That piece of getting back home is critical there. What about you? What would you tell a young female economist who really wants to build a life in Nigeria, but is kind of skeptical? Will this work for me? I think I just want to leave.
Okay. So I think the decision to leave your home country is deeply personal. That's one. Because there are a lot of, apart from the economic benefits, yes, labor will always chase higher wages. But apart from the economic benefits, people have their families here. So it has to be a well thought out decision. That's one. But I would say, regardless of whether you decide to remain or to emigrate, you should be globally competitive. Yes. In today's world, that is what will make you stand out. Whether it's with regards to acquiring better knowledge, like the professor said, or cutting edge skills, or leveraging technology, or expanding your network, you should be globally competitive.
Good point there. Thank you. And final question to each of you. What is there something that is really in your mind, but I didn't write it down, I didn't ask you the question, I didn't think about it, but you think is important for our African audience, but particularly for the Nigerian audience? What would that be? Final thoughts on each of you, maybe in under a minute or so, please. There's a thought in your mind, there's a number you're thinking about, there's a concept you have in mind. I did not ask you about it, but you have it in mind, you want the audience to know about. What would that be? Professor Adi, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so, we often talk of Pan-Africanism, right? But we always, for us, it's more like something that we like to speak when we have conferences, so bazaar talks, but never actually, putting anything to work. So we should, at this juncture, right, in the global development, we're talking about value chain development, value chain domestication. All right. I think we can do more if we begin to trade with each other. But unfortunately, we can't trade with each other except we have, connecting infrastructure. In the past, we had African leaders that were interested in really connecting Africa. But today, with the leaders we have in Africa, have not managed to even connect their own, states, not to talk of Africa. And that's a very big problem. So if you go to America, so you can see that, inter-country relations keep expanding. Countries relate with each other on the basis of what they can gain. Right. But here in Africa, we've not really, after the independence period of the 1960s, there seems to have been complete erosion of that passion to really build an Africa. You hear that in conferences, AU, AFCTA, but then when you begin to analyze that, in details, like what are the supporting infrastructure, you see nothing. And then there is little effort to really get that to work. So yeah, that's the only missing link, that I felt we can, cover.
Thank you, Professor Adi. Ma?
Okay. So here, I will differ slightly with the professor. I actually think that there are a lot of activities on the continent front, right, on the regional front. There seems to be an awakening, particularly as it relates to economics and also finance. So the AU recently launched the African Credit Ratings Agency. That's just one example. there are discussions to launch, region-wide financial institutions, from the African Monetary Fund to the African Central Bank. And then, we've seen a lot of traction, not as much as we would like, or as as we would, as we would like. But we've seen a lot of activities in recent times, at least in the last couple of years. So my advice or my recommendation will be for citizens to keep an eye out, and in their sphere, right, hold their leaders accountable, whether it's through civil society organizations, or but in whatever, through the media, in whatever sphere, in whatever sphere, hold their leaders accountable, in order that their leaders are able to move the needle with regards to the establishments and the functioning, and even establishment and functioning of these Pan-African institutions.
Well,
thank you.
Okay,
so if I may add something, let me respond, because you're fair with me. So we in the classroom, we have the opportunity to interact and engage with CEOs of African, big African firms. Now, the last one, which was 2 weeks ago, so we at the Lagos Business School, we run the Global Chief Executive Program. So we've got CEOs from Kenya, from Rwanda, from Ethiopia, from all over Africa in the class. And what I heard each of them express their frustration with traveling in Africa. It's easier for them to travel from here to Europe, to America, to even the polar region. But to move around Africa, the frustrations they experience is unimaginable. Wow. That is itself a discouraging factor. Again, have you tried to move or engage with guys who do intercontinental travels or moving goods from one part of Africa to another? It's a killing stuff. You don't even want to talk about it. So I like it when they talk about all those monetary stuff. But for me, money follows the goods. Let's build the infrastructure that can get the goods going. Money that's a simple matter. It's like internet. So that's broadband is simple.
Yes, I agree with you, Prof. There are bottlenecks with regards to transport logistics and with regards to travel, whether it's visa or even travel routes. But on the economics and on the financial aspect, we're seeing some progress. I'll give another example. At the UN, last year, the UN heard developing countries led by Nigeria and South Africa, they had their case for multinational enterprises to be taxed as a single entity. So no longer Google Nigeria or Google US or Google Ghana, but Google as a single entity. And also for there to be a minimum corporate tax, right? So that would, if implemented, that would curb tax evasion or, tax avoidance with multinational enterprises. It hasn't been adopted yet, but when the votes were casted, developing countries overwhelmingly voted in favor of that, and so it's in the talks. It was led by Nigeria, supported by South Africa. Years ago, that would probably not have been the case, but now all across the continent, we're gaining expertise, we're gaining better negotiation skills, and we're gaining seats at this table, whether regionally and also, even beyond the region. So yes, there are definitely bottlenecks, there are definitely obstacles, there are definitely challenges, but there's still some pockets of good news or success stories that we can champion and we can push forward.
Okay, well, that does it. Seriously, I have to end it there because we have another guest coming up who is going to tell us more about what we are experiencing in Nigeria, how that is affecting other regions of the west coast of Africa, and even bigger the continent. Ma Amara Ekirechi of the Center for the Study of Economics of Africa in Abuja, Professor Abongo Adi of Lagos Business School. Thank you both. You gave us an hour that was harder and more useful than the version of this conversation that usually gets broadcast. And I am grateful to both of you for your time today. I know it's not easy to get basic professionals like you into a conversation on a Saturday when you're supposed to be with family or relaxing or doing leisure. We appreciate your time. We will keep in touch with you because we really value your expertise for discussing Africa, even beyond Nigeria, because this platform is to discuss Africa. It is for the African citizen, and we value the two of you as African citizens who are playing your part in Nigeria to make a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
having me.
Okay.
All right.
Bye. And for you listeners out there, here's where we leave that hour. We ask the two guests. We really do appreciate their presence here and their contribution to this conversation. A country whose numbers are improving and whose people are not feeling it, and two economists who have just told us that the reason may have less to do with economics than with who answers for what. Stay with us because in our two, we take that same problem and move the camera back because Nigeria does not get to have this argument in private. One in every five Africans is Nigerian. And when Nigeria is preoccupied with itself, an entire region feels the absence. My guest for the second hour is Dr. Giles Yabi. He's an economist and analyst who founded Wati, is a citizen think tank in Dakar. We talk about what West Africa genuinely depends on Nigeria for, and ECOWAS has become, and whether anyone has stepped into that space that a distant Nigeria leaves behind. Okay, that is next on the Africa Desk Live. So stay with us and don't go anywhere. Well, folks, welcome back to the Africa Desk Live. This is our two of episode 11 of 54 Conversations. And this hour, we are turning the camera around. In the first hour just passed, two Nigerian economists sat with the question of why a set of national numbers that finally looks better on paper is not arriving in Nigerian households. That is a question Nigeria is asking itself. This hour asks a different one. Nigeria is not a country that gets to be different in private or difficult in private. One in every five Africans is Nigerian. When Nigeria moves, West Africa feels it. When Nigeria is distracted, West Africa feels that too. So the question for this hour is not what Nigeria is doing to itself. It is what Nigeria is doing to and for the region around it. And it is a good week to be asking. This is the first day of August. And the first days of August belong to a particular set of neighbors. Benin marks 66 years of independence on this very day. Niger follows on the 3rd, Burkina Faso on the 5th, Cote d'Ivoire on the 7th. Four countries that came out of the same colonial arrangement in the same year, and four countries whose paths since could hardly be more different. This is the neighborhood we are talking about. My guest for this hour has spent his career on exactly this question, and he has done so from inside the region rather than from a capital from somewhere else. Dr. Jails Yabid is an economist and political analyst and the founder of WATI, the West African Citizen think tank based in Dakar. WATI was built on an unusual premise for an institution of its kind, that the analysis of West Africa should be done with West African citizens rather than about them. Before founding it, he led the International Crisis Group's West Africa project. He has worked as a journalist himself and writes regularly for the region and international press. Dr. Yabi, thank you for making the time and for staying with us through a rescheduling that was not actually of your doing. Welcome to the Africa Desk Live.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, to be with you and all the followers.
Good. I want to start wide. Strip away the phrase giant of Africa, which everybody uses and almost nobody examines it. When you look at West Africa as it is right now in 2026, what does the region genuinely depend on Nigeria for? And what has it learned to do without it?
Well, I think it's a good question to start with. I think the main thing is, and the first thing is demography. When you take the West Africa region as a whole, and then you take the population of Nigeria, you just realize how important Nigeria is in demographic terms for West Africa. Of course, one can imagine a region without a regional integration project, without ECOWAS as an organization, without the idea of building something together. It is absolutely possible. But if you think about a regional integration project, and that was the reason for the creation of ECOWAS in 1975. If you think about regional integration in West Africa, you need, of course, to think about the particular role of Nigeria. You cannot build regional integration in West Africa without an important place for Nigeria. And I think it was the case some decades ago. It's still the case now. And again, if you look at the demographic trends, of course, Nigeria is not the only African countries with quite quick demographic growth. But of course, when you start from very high numbers and you keep a very high growth rate of a population, it means that Nigeria is going to be one of the major superpowers, at least in terms of demography in the world in 2 or 3 decades. So it means, again, that it matters. And when you have a big country, a populated country, you also have, an important economy. It doesn't mean that people are doing much better than in smaller countries, but it means that as a country, your weight is more important. The Nigerian economic weight is still by far the most important in the region, almost 60% of the GDP of West Africa.
Wow. So let's dig deeper into that question a little bit. Is this dependence economic? Is it demographic? Is it military? Is it diplomatic or cultural? And which of those 5 is the most real right now, as opposed to the most talked about?
No, I think it is all of this, because again, with the size of a population, who have the size of the economy, and then it means more capacity in terms of doing things. And I will come back to that, because when you have a regional organization, you need to have a nice project, but you also need to do things. And when you need to do things, you need capacity. And when you need capacity, you need an economic size to back that capacity. So that is an important point. And again, the military dimension also is very important. A big country will have more numbers in terms of soldiers, in terms of security forces more generally, even if they are not necessarily very efficient, but at least you have the numbers. Very smaller countries might have a very good organization of security forces of the army, but they won't be able to mobilize several thousands of people. And again, it still matters. Even with technological development, it still matters to have a lot of people. That's why you have the US having a big army, and then you also have over asset, of course. So Nigeria is also an important country in the region in terms of military capacity, even if, again, there is a lot of things to be said about actually the failures and the limitation of the Army of Nigeria and the security forces more generally. But still, if ECOWAS as a region still needs to intervene in the country of a region, or still need to play an important role in the African continent, you will need a strong military forces, and you won't have a strong military forces in West Africa without Nigeria. So these elements are all important. Maybe just to end about the cultural dimension, and because I think it is important. Again, that's why I mentioned initially the fact that regional integration is not something, it's not a given. It's something which is built. It's built on the idea that we want to project ourselves collectively. We can have, in some part of the world, you don't have this regional organization, but you still have countries, making progress and maybe having some good collaboration without a strong, clear common integration project. But if you have a common integration project, then of course it is also important to include the cultural dimension and to make sure that all the diversity of the region is taken into account. And in terms of diversity, just the diversity, ethno-cultural diversity of Nigeria is something absolutely exceptional. And I think it should be an asset for the region. It has not been the case so far.
Let's take the economic claim here for a second. Nigeria is the largest economy in the bloc by most measures. What does that actually deliver to a trader in Cotonou, or a manufacturer in Lomé, Togo, or a family in Niamey? Where does that economic might, where does it touch ordinary citizens' lives on the region?
The most important response is the market, the size of the market. When I talk about the size of economy, the size of the population, in economic terms, it translates into a very large market for goods, market for services. And when you have a regional organization with protocols that ensure free movement of goods and services, for example, then it means that a trader in Cotonou will be able to take advantage of the regional market, and this regional market will include Nigeria. So if you take Benin as an example, with a population, I think, which has actually been increasing as well. I think it's almost around 10 million now. But as compared with 200 million people, of course, you can see a huge difference. And you have smaller countries than Benin in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau, of course, Cape Verde and the Gambia. So you have small countries in the region. The advantage of being in a regional organization with some free movement of people and of goods is that you can take advantage of a bigger market and not just your home market. And that's changed a lot. Of course, the fact that you have a possibility to sell goods, to sell agricultural produce, for example, to Nigeria, your big neighbor, when you are in Benin, it doesn't mean that it will be easy. You need the capacity to serve that market. You need the logistics to be able to, for example, to carry your very nice pineapples from Benin, which are really, very nice. You need logistics to be able to sell them every day to Lagos, for example. And actually, that's what has been happening for decades, but probably not, in the numbers that could be expected if we had better logistics and not all these administrative and governance failures, in the region, not only in Nigeria, but in the region.
There is a version of the argument that says Nigeria's real regional power lies not in its economy, but in its people and culture. Its music, you see Nigerian music all over the continent and around the world. Its film, lots of people around the world watch Nigerian movies. Its churches, its diaspora. Nigeria has lots and lots of expertise and professionals outside of Africa. Its sheer demographic mass. Is that soft power doing more regional work right now for Nigeria than the hard kind of power?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it reflects the evolution of Nigeria again in the last 3 or 4 decades. The reality is that Nigeria has been facing a lot of problems, a lot of security problems, and not been able to tackle its own security problems. It has not been able to tackle its governance problems. Governance is a nice way of also of talking about corruption. It has not been able to sustain or to improve, the what is for me always the foundation of the country, which is the human capital basis, which is education in a very large meaning of the term education. So there have been many problems, and not enough progress as compared with the growth of the population in Nigeria. But what has been very effective has been the cultural industry, the films and the music. And this is not just for actually West Africa. It is, I think, the reflection of the soft power of Nigeria globally, not even in Africa, but globally, because all the big names of the Nigerian music, Burna Boy and a few others, they are all now known by the youth in America, in Asia, everywhere, in Europe, of course. So I think definitely this has been the most important asset for Nigeria in terms of influence. But I think, and it is important to note that what has been working very well is actually more of a result of individual talents plus creativity than the result of public policies. And that's why I said it is a reflection of what has been happening in the country and what has been happening in many countries of the region. Lack of states capacity and lack of very good political leadership to make the kind of transformation that we need.
If Nigeria had that military might, I remember as a victim of war from my home country, Liberia. It was Nigeria who helped to send peacekeepers in Liberia to help with the peace. If Nigeria has that military might and Nigeria has that soft power, and still it is experiencing security issues on the ground in Nigeria, what does that tell us? Can Nigeria use its soft power to solve the social issues within Nigeria? Is that possible?
Well, unfortunately, I think that you cannot count just on this soft power and the growth and the emergence of a very dynamic cultural industry sector. I'm afraid that is not enough to be able to solve social problems that are linked to the lack of economic transformation, which economic transformation means having the possibility to have a real engine for growth and for employment in a country, again, which are very big numbers. So you need to create jobs. You need to create economic opportunities. Cultural industry has been actually part of that response because we have been providing also jobs, in the film industry, in the music. It's not just entertainment, it's also an economy, but it's not enough. It's not going to be enough given, again, the size of the population, given the social needs of the population. It is extremely important to have a more ambition in terms of economic transformation.
So is that why the problem persists? Is it because of the population of the people, or 200 million people? Nigeria is rich; it has a lot of resources, and if it has the military might, the economic might, why hasn't it been able to really solve the people's problems in Kaduna, in Lagos, in all the villages and towns across Nigeria? It has the resources. Why is it not able to solve the problems for fellow Nigerians?
It's an important question. I think when I talk about demography, I should be clear. The problem is not the people. The problem is not the numbers. The problem is what are the capacity that we are building to be able to serve those numbers, especially if you have more kids, you need you need more schools, but not just we tend to focus on infrastructure, and actually we have a lot of deficit in terms of infrastructure. But what is more important, or at least as important as having school, for example, is having teachers, is having material, having books, having all the elements that will mean having a strong education system, and you need that from the pre-primary school to the universities. You need a strong health system. Everyone, I think, heard about some very terrible mistakes or neglects in some hospitals in Nigeria. We are seeing the same in many countries in the region, where the lack of attention, the lack of electricity, the lack of basic things means people, kids being lost. So these are the reality, and we need to face those realities. And I think for me, the significant explanation for these realities is, again, what has not been done properly in the last few decades. Unfortunately, it means that it's not going to be reversed easily, because there are some things that you cannot just fix by AI or new technologies. You need a sustained investment in human capital. Just one example: you cannot have an economic transformation without access to energy. It's just not possible. Energy is the most important determinant of economic progress, in the reality when we think about the real economy, because again, you need energy to transform your natural resources, and everything that we have around us, it is natural resources which is transformed, basically. And a country like Nigeria, with all the oil and gas reserves, all the mineral resources that the country had, we know that he has not been exploited in the right way. We know that Nigeria should be, maybe 10 times more economically developed than it is, if there were not so many waste of resources, so many corruption, and also some some lack of interest for, I should say, for the people. It's not pointing to Nigeria. It is the same governance deficit that we have in many African countries. There is, of course, the external influences definitely affecting our trajectories, but I think there are a lot of things that we can fix by just being more interested in, bringing opportunities for everyone, fixing the most important issues like energy access. And again, a good example that it was possible is what happened in the last few years with the big refinery of Dangote. This is happening now. It should have happened 2 decades ago, and there were some refineries in Nigeria. They were just not working properly, and probably deliberately, because a lot of people have been taking advantage of importing transformed oil instead of developing the local capacity to refine the oil. So you have to get into these kind of details to be able, I think, to understand what happened in Nigeria and what has been happening in many other countries of the continent.
Dr. Yabi, there's a theme that I see permeating across Africa. And I mentioned this last week when we had a Gambia episode. There was a mention of destructive corruption ongoing within the police force and within the governance in South Africa, in Kenya, when we discussed Kenya, in Sierra Leone, when we discussed Sierra Leone, in the Gambia, in Liberia, all the countries. Today is the 12th. So we intend to go around to discuss all the 54 countries of Africa. For the 11 ones we've discussed, there is always that theme. I keep hearing corruption in almost every African country. In your view, and based on your experience analysis you've been doing, why is corruption so rampant in Africa? And how can we get rid of corruption to make room for a future better Africa for African citizens?
Yeah, that's that's a large topic. I think it could deserve a standalone conversation, because it is very important, I think, to take time to explain corruption, what is actually, what it means. I think different people have different perception, and I think the general conception as corruption as using public position for private gains is the one that I like, because it is very broad. It's not just linked to a transaction, because I think behind the corruption, behind what we are observing in African countries, the main problem is really I would say in French, sens de l'intérêt général, this idea of public interest, common goods and public interest. When you are in a position of governing a country, or you are working for a state, actually you should be working. This very core principle of public administration is that you are serving the people. If this is not entrenched in public administration, of course, you will have a lot of deviation, and people will be working for themselves. And so there is I would say, an ethical dimension to this issue of corruption. But as an economist by training, I also insist on being very realistic and observing corruption globally. Corruption exists everywhere. It's not an African problem. People have a temptation when they don't have the right incentives, they don't have the right context. People everywhere have a temptation of working for their own interest. So you need to create the environment. You need to create the context. You need to have the right incentives, so that people who are working in a specific position, for example, in the government, they see that working for the common goods, doing the work, actually is bringing themselves what they need to have a decent life, and that it is the just remuneration for what they do. And they should have also the feeling that people around them are not stealing the money, they are not being corrupted. So if you are in a context, in an environment where you are in a government, in a ministry, and people around you give you a feeling that they are working for themselves, even if you are very honest and you want to do just your job for the common good, and then at one point you would just say, okay, I have to do like all my colleagues, and I have to do like the minister himself if he is flying his own plane, or clearly having a lifestyle which is beyond what is supposed to be his level of resources. So what I mean is that it is important when we want to fight corruption to work on the ethical dimension. This can be, it's not something impossible. You can do that through the education. You can do that through a lot of programs, even for public servants. And you also need to work on incentives. It means reducing, again, the possibilities of corruption. That's why all the digitalization programs are extremely effective in reducing corruption, just because you are closing some of the doors for corruption. You are closing some of the opportunities. So it's not an ethical problem. It's just that you are reinforcing the means to control the use of the access to resources and the use of resources. And we know that corruption has been fought in many countries in the world. So we just have to draw lesson from what has been experienced elsewhere. If we really want to fight corruption, we can do it. And we should be realistic. For me, we never, at WATI, we never, say that we want to eliminate corruption. We said that we want to reduce it. You have to reduce it at the level where it's not having a very massive impact on your economy, a massive impact on your people. But again, you cannot eliminate corruption because you always have you have a point in when the resources that you need to invest to fight corruption is just too important if the level of corruption is actually not so high. So we need to reduce significantly the corruption, and we know how we can do it if we really want to do it.
Okay, that's good to know, and thank you for that context there. Absolutely. Now, going back to Nigeria, because I went wide in looking to West Africa and Africa as a whole. Now, for Nigeria in particular, aside from the 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 economic part we talk about, now let's look at the military. Like I mentioned in my preceding comment, Nigeria was the country that really put troops on the ground whenever there is crisis in the region. I mentioned Liberia, I mentioned, and let me mention Sierra Leone, and maybe somewhere else. Talk to us, Dr. Yabit. Is that Nigeria still available? And if it is available, is it willing to still do these missions if those conflicts again happen in the region?
No, it's not really available right now. There's Nigeria. That was the Nigeria which intervenes, through ECOMOG in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and actually these civil wars also touched Guinea at that time, forest region of Guinea. This Nigeria does not exist anymore. It doesn't mean that it cannot be recreated, but again, in the last few decades, I think there were a lot of leadership deficit in Nigeria, and we have this very significant growth of Boko Haram, and then of course we know now that we have many other groups in northern Nigeria, and we also have a lot of groups that are not necessarily putting forward a religious dimension, but who are criminal groups, targeting people, kidnapping kids, etc., etc. So this level of insecurity has become something quite normal in Nigeria, and that's a lot again about what happened in the country in the last few decades. And as mentioned before, when you have this level of internal security problems, and of course you have additional problems, economic problems and social problems internally, it is clear that for those governing Nigeria in the last few decades, it was not really possible for them to be more interested in what's going on outside Nigeria and in the region. And I think one of the major, probably the number one explanation of weakening of ECOWAS as an organization in the last few decades is the weakening of Nigeria. When you have your major country, which is facing a lot of internal problems, it means that it's not in a position to deal with regional problems and to play the role that should be expected from these regional hegemons. So again, when you just look at the military, Nigerian army still have the numbers, but we know that there's a lot of problems of equipment. We know, again, back to corruption, that there were some very well-known documented episodes of corruption in the security forces. When you have corruption in the country, it's a big problem. But when you have a corruption in the security sector, meaning the army, you have an even more important problems, because it's not just the use of resources. People tend to see only the fact that you have a lot of millions of dollars who are supposed to be spent on equipment, for example, that is being diverted by some military and civilian leaders. But the problem is more than that. It's also a question of the time. When you have this kind of sophisticated corruption schemes, it means that the people who are supposed to be thinking on a daily basis about the security of a country, they are actually working on finding ways to steal money, basically. So the cost is not just, again, the resource. The cost is also the time. It means that no one is actually being really preoccupied by working on reinforcing the security of a country. And I think part of the insecurity in Nigeria has been a result of these focus on individual gains from position, including in the security sector. I think all of this is being. I hope that there has been progress in the last few years to rebuild the integrity in the defense sector. But again, it's a battle which should be a permanent battle, and citizens themselves should be leading those battles to make sure that the institutions that are in charge of the security of the country are more efficient and more focused on the job. So again, given all of that, you cannot expect Nigeria to be playing a very important role militarily in a country, in neighboring countries in the Sahel. Nigeria, as many other countries in the region, tried to help Mali in 2012. People tend to look at France and to forget that West African countries were the very first countries to send soldiers on the ground in Mali, but with a lot of logistical problems, and Nigeria did not have the capacity that he had before to be able to sustain such engagements.
Wow, that is really interesting. And since you pivoted a little bit to ECOWAS, let's talk a little bit more about ECOWAS. I got a few questions here to ask about ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, for our audience who don't know what ECOWAS is. So, and some of the questions I'm going to be asking here, actually, I wrote those questions based on the summit that was just recently concluded in Freetown, based on the discussions they had there. ECOWAS, as it stands right now, 3 member states have gone. Okay, the bloc has just held its summit in Freetown, and according to the reports that I'm gathering, it has appointed a former Senegalese defense minister as head of the commission and signed off on the long-term plan for security, for democracy, and economic integration. Is that institution, ECOWAS as a whole, is it recovering, or is it an institution that is in decline gradually?
I think ECOWAS can recover. I would not say that it's already recovering. I think that ECOWAS faced very difficult moments. Of course, after the departure of 3 countries of the Sahel, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, which together formed the Alliance des États du Sahel, the Alliance of Sahel States. And it is important, again, factually, to remind people that this decision of departure of these countries was taken by the military leaders of these countries without consultation of the people of their countries. It means that also if the political leadership in these countries change at one point, it is absolutely possible for Mali, Niger, or Burkina Faso to come back in ECOWAS. I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon, but I think that, again, no one knows what is going to happen in terms of politics in these countries in the next few years, and what that will change in the prospect for a comeback to ECOWAS.
Was it the will, before you go further, was that the will of the people in those countries? Did the people agree? Did they approve that the government should leave ECOWAS, or was it just the leadership who decided that?
I think for me, it's very important always to be factual and to be clear about, again, what happens. There was no consultation of the people. That is a fact. The decision was taken by the military leaders. It doesn't mean that people, the majority, could not have been supporting this decision. Afterwards, the kind of polls that were made, of course, it is very important to have some distance about the methodology, etc., of those polls. The indication of most of the surveys of the people in these countries is that people support the departure from ECOWAS. But I think it's very important when you talk about the position of the people, what kind of information that they have. When you don't have a public debate about one issue, what are the elements that make people forming their own judgment about a situation in the context of closed civic space, the context where all the information is controlled by the government and the military government. Are we sure that people can really express their opinion and they can listen to each other's, to different voices, and then form an opinion? I don't think that was the case in this country. So again, even if we can show that people, this decision is supported by the majority of the people, it doesn't mean, in my opinion, that the people has decided. A decision is always has to be based on the set of information which is available. And again, in the context of the crisis of these countries, this decision was taken by the military leadership, and there was one clear reason for me, which was very, very obvious for the decision. It was the idea that they want free hands in terms of duration of a transition. Actually, they want to decide if it is a transition or not. And so they don't want to be submitted to the protocols of ECOWAS and to the kind of decision that the ECOWAS as a bloc could take. So I don't think that the decision of departure was based on a clear analysis of the gains for the people. I think that is very clear. But to come back to ECOWAS and where it stands, I think I happen to know personally the Senegalese who is going to be the president of the commission.
That's good.
Yes, because, well, I think what is good is that I think that it is someone who is prepared for this role. He has been head of the Senegalese army before being Minister of Defense, but also he spent a lot of time in the UN as one of the main military advisors of the UN peacekeeping missions in the world. And he has a very I think he has a good knowledge of the region, and not just on the defense and security issues, but a good knowledge of the importance of having civilian responses as well as military responses to insecurity. And I think that is a key point, especially in the Sahel, where you have military leaders who think that military response is the only effective response to the groups, the armed groups that we are facing. And I think that General Beran Diop, who is going to be the president of the Commission, I hope that he will be in a position to have a more nuanced and more sophisticated analysis of regional insecurity, and he will be able to build also bridges with these three countries that have left ECOWAS, and at the same time preserve the principle upon which ECOWAS was built, and the protocols that have been developed, especially on democracy and good governance. It is very important to, at the same time, build this security cooperation with the Sahel countries, but not, at the price of abandoning some of the key principles of ECOWAS, which is not just an economic integration project, it's also a project based around values, especially principles of rule of law, democracy, and protection of civic space and human rights.
Interesting there. So the same summit I'm talking about that these guys went to in Freetown, the summit approved the gas pipeline running from Nigeria up to the coast of Morocco in the north. Projects of that scale have a way of being announced more often than they are built. Is this one different? And what would Nigeria have to be able to do for it to become a reality?
No, you rightly mentioned the fact that, we had some big projects like that, and we heard about it for years and maybe for decades, and then, it never materialized. I think that this has a good chance to materialize, mainly because we can see in the last few years that you have more and more projects like that with some very important actors, state actors, but also private sector actors who have a capacity really to implement, to make things happen. And I think the fact also that Morocco is involved in this it's probably one of the reasons why there are good reason to think that it's going to work, because they have shown, in terms of development of infrastructure in Morocco and Iran, they have shown a real capacity to do things, and more, I would say, that seriousness in doing things like this, and they are quite pragmatic, and I think that they want that to happen. They need that, actually, because it's also going to serve their own economy, and the idea is really to take advantage of the resources from the West African coast and from Nigeria in particular, and then to be able to carry it to the north, and then also part of it to Europe. And the pipeline project is going to provide some gain for all the countries that are on the way. So hopefully it will materialize. It will take some time because it's very complex projects. But again, when you have a clear and certain economic benefits from a project, then you are more incentive for people to do it really and to do it quickly. But maybe this is an example of a big project that should have been, I think, implemented in the region, and could have changed the perception of ECOWAS by the people. I always think about the train, for example, in West Africa. I think if ECOWAS has been able just to do one thing, like having a train, a railway, a West African railway connecting Nigeria to Niger, to Benin, to Cote d'Ivoire, this would have changed completely the economy of the region. It would have changed the local economy, because the train creates small local economies everywhere, and it would have changed the regional integration project in West Africa. It's good that in the last few years, Nigeria, for example, has been able to launch again investment in rail, but I think it should have been a regional project, a regional ambition. It's more effective than just bringing even roads to have a big railway project in the region.
So when you take a look back, the way ECOWAS handled those coup d'etats that recently happened in the region, when you weigh it now with some distance, was ECOWAS's response, did that strengthen ECOWAS or it weaken it based on the way they responded to those coup d'etats in the region?
I think first thing to say is that what is happening in a region like West Africa, and what is happening to a regional organization like ECOWAS is partly and first of all the result of what is happening at the individual country level. You cannot have an efficient ECOWAS with dysfunctional member states. ECOWAS does not exist, how do you say that, irrespective of the member states. This is a very important point, because in the public debate in West Africa, people tend to blast ECOWAS for everything, forgetting that, again, the leadership of ECOWAS, the political leadership of ECOWAS, it's the political leadership of a member state. It's not ECOWAS Commission, who choose the president of Nigeria, or the president of Benin, or president of Niger. So it is very important to understand the link between the regional organization and the member states. Political will, political decision, and the capacity of a regional organization all are the results of the political leadership and the capacity of the member states. That is a very important point. The second point is that what I think weakened ECOWAS, I mentioned Nigeria weakening, I would say, in the midterm, in 2 or 3 decades, the fact that you have a major country of a region, which should be the anchor of ECOWAS, being more and more fragile and unable to face its own internal problems, and of course, abandoning part of his regional responsibility. So I would say the number one reason of weakening of ECOWAS is the weakening of the most important member state in terms of capacity. And then the second element is the political evolution of individual countries of a region. ECOWAS is not it's not because of ECOWAS that we had military coups. it's not because of ECOWAS that we have terrorist activity in the Sahel countries. It is because of partly the internal incapacity to respond to political and security challenges, and of course the result also of external factors. But it's not because of the regional integration project and because of the existence of a regional organization that you have the kind of failures that we have in many countries of the region. So for me, I would not say that the response to the coup was one of the reasons of the weakening of ECOWAS. I would say the coup themselves that reflects the trajectory of these individual countries are part of the explanation of the weakening of ECOWAS. But the response itself was not definitely, in my opinion, a very effective responses. I think some specific decisions were just wrong decisions that were taken by the head of state, and that's also an important point. The head of states summit, which is the conference of head of state of ECOWAS, is the political body making decisions. There is a difference between the head of states and the commission of ECOWAS, and then the entire community. So I think some mistakes, some wrong decisions were made by the head of states, mostly because they tend to make decisions not only based on analysis, including internal analysis by the commission, they tend to make some decision based on their own interest and their own reading of the situation in particular countries. And I think, for example, the decision of sanctions, the extensive sanctions, not the principle of sanction, but the fact that extensive sanctions were applied to the countries of the Sahel, especially to Niger, for example. I think that was a wrong decision because it actually helped the military leaders to mobilize the population against ECOWAS and to present, to make people forget about the coup and just focus on the response by ECOWAS. I think the threat of military intervention also after the coup in Niger was a very important wrong decision by ECOWAS, because again, it actually solidifies the position of those who did the coup in Niger. They were able to get people to forget about the toppling of the president and then to present themselves as being defending the sovereignty of the country against France and against ECOWAS. So I think ECOWAS head of states, again, they made a number of decisions in the last few years that did not help and were negative. But I think it is very important for the citizen of the region to understand that ECOWAS has a lot of achievements in 50 years of existence, and that ECOWAS is not just the group of the head of state. ECOWAS is much more than that. And when we don't make this kind of distinction, I think it's completely distracts from the real question that we should be asking, which is how to reform ECOWAS, how to make ECOWAS more effective, and how to reform individual countries. Without significant political reform in the member states, ECOWAS can't do miracle for this region.
Interesting analysis. And this question, this is a worthy question. It's for you and your organization. And so I want to put it plainly to you, okay? And because you just talked about ECOWAS here a few minutes ago, is there a version of ECOWAS that the citizens themselves, not the head of state, would recognize as theirs versus what the head of state recognizes as theirs?
Well, yes, I tend also to say regularly that even if ECOWAS has done just the freedom, has ensured the freedom of people in West Africa, this would be enough to justify the existence of the organization and actually to recognize that he has been an important for the citizens of the region. Because of ECOWAS, we don't have visa, we can freely circulate. Of course, there are some obstacles, real obstacles at the borders, but that's very important to also show that those obstacles are the results of the political leadership of individual countries. It is the police, the custom officers for individual member states who sometimes are an obstacle to the freedom of people in the region. These are not people working for the Commission of ECOWAS. These are people working for the states. So if we have states that does not ensure the respect of the regional protocols, so the citizens should be asking questions to the states, to the political leadership of the state. But the reality still, even with all those obstacles on the ground, we still have a region in West Africa where people can freely move, but people can also establish themselves. It is very important that to know that the rule of ECOWAS is not just people can be tourists. It's also the capacity, the possibility for someone from Nigeria to be established in Benin, to be established in Ivory Coast, and to be able to work in this country. So these are extremely important achievement of ECOWAS. And it is important also to know that even in this current situation where free member states and the leaders have decided to withdraw the countries and the people from the regional community, people from Mali, from Niger, from Burkina Faso still enjoy. And I think that this is going to be preserved because it is the willingness of ECOWAS member states, the 12 remaining ECOWAS member states, it is their will to preserve this advantage to the countries of the Sahel and to the population of the Sahel countries. Malians, Nigerians, and people from Burkina Faso can still travel without visa, without restriction, and they can still work in the countries of ECOWAS without, being harassed. So this is an example of the importance of defending ECOWAS as an idea, as a project of integration, as a projection in the future, and not just, accusing ECOWAS instead of pointing to the responsibilities of the individual countries of the region. ECOWAS is not a reason for citizens, for individual countries not to push for political change and economic change at the national level. You don't have a European Union actually, doing the work of the individual state in Europe. You have the individual states doing their own work, the citizen of this state pushing for reform internally, and then you have a regional community that adds some value to what individual countries are doing. That is also what we should be doing in West Africa, preserving ECOWAS as a project, working to making more efficient, but at the same time working for the kind of political and economic and social change that we want to see in each member state of a region.
So, very good point there. Earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned about ECOWAS, Nigeria's leadership role in ECOWAS, and I don't see it as being played prominently right now as it was those days when there were civil wars and Nigeria took part in helping peacekeeping and things like those. For an organization that is 50 years old, I'm wondering if Nigeria is weakened administratively to lead ECOWAS. Has anyone else stepped into that role? Can someone else step into that role? Say Senegal, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, as an outside power to actually lead ECOWAS?
No, I think it's an important question. When I mention Nigeria's leadership role, it's not to say that, of course, the entire regional community should be led by Nigeria. The idea behind the regional community, also the idea that the countries have the same weights politically. When decisions are made, all states are equal. And that is a very important pillar of a regional integration project, to make sure that you have this idea of all the countries, the Cape Verde, less than 1 million people, and Nigeria, 200 million people, is having the same say in the decision of a regional organization. It is a very important principle. But in the reality of the capacity, the influence, the influence always depends on the reality. And the reality is that a big country like Nigeria has more clout than small countries. But I think when you look at the region, you have Nigeria, and then you have, in terms of population and in terms of size of economy, you have two countries that are quite similar, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. Yeah. So these are the two countries that we can think that when you have a weakened Nigeria, we can expect Ghana plus plus Ivory Coast maybe to step in and to play a more important role. And then you have Senegal, which has a very dynamic diplomacy, but is, in terms of economic terms, is still behind Ivory Coast and Ghana. So these countries, of course, the other countries can play a role. Even smaller countries like Benin, Togo can play an important role diplomatically. But again, when you need to respond by projects or programs that cost a lot of resources, then you need to mobilize resources, then you need more capacity, then Nigeria is really the country that can play an important role, because it can bring more resources on the table, and it might be also in a position to attract more resources from outside the region. But definitely, I think the idea of reforming or reinforcing ECOWAS in the next few years and decades, I think it is an important priority. It should be a priority for the region. It should be supported by the citizens who should understand, again, the need to preserve a regional integration project and to recognize the achievements so far. It is very important, again, to involve leaders from not only Nigeria, but also Ghana, Ivory Coast, the entire region, to try to, I would say that, to give birth again to people who believe in the regional integration project. Because I think behind what is happening is also the fact that there's a feeling that you have less and less people in all the countries of the region who really are interested in what is happening, next door and in the region. Less and less people, including in senior position in our countries, who want to understand Nigeria, want to understand Ghana, want to understand of the other countries. And if you don't have this level of interest and knowledge, you cannot actually build a strong regional community. So I strongly believe in regional integration, but I think that we should really spend time to explain to the people, to the citizen, why the regional integration is a project, is not a given, and is also more and more important in a world which is fragmented, which is more dangerous than before. So without having strong African blocs, I don't see any possibility for us to have more weight in world affairs. So there is also a strategic geopolitical dimension to the idea of defending and reinforcing regional integration and reinforcing ECOWAS.
On democracy here, and I want you to be honest with my audience about the direction of the travel here. Elections, civilian rule, civic space, the room a journalist or an activist has to work in, and the list goes on and on. When you look at these things on the West Africa region right now, where is West Africa actually heading, and where does Nigeria sit inside that picture?
I'm afraid that West Africa for now is heading in the wrong direction in terms of democracy, civic space, human rights, and the elections, in terms of quality of elections. There are a few exceptions, but very few exceptions, and the number of exceptions tend to be decreasing in the region. That is the reality. The reality, I'm thinking while thinking about, not just the general situation, but about people that I know. Some of the people that I know who are from the civil society in countries like Burkina Faso, in countries like Mali, some of them have been arrested, some have disappeared, purely. Yes. That's the reality today. So there's a lot of noise about sovereignty, a lot of noise about working for the real independence of our countries, especially people from the Sahel, people outside thinking that what is happening in a country like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger is a real African revolution, and that's going into the good direction. The reality is that those people would not, I think, be very happy to have parents who are not involved in any kind of criminal activity being just arrested and then disappeared. So that's the reality of what is happening. It's part of the reality of what is happening in the region. But I tend also to insist on the fact that this restriction of civic space, this regression of the principle of democracy and a governance that includes the people, this is not only happening in military-led countries, is happening also in some of the countries in West Africa where you have elected civilian leaders. It is very important because I think it is the very idea of democratic governance, which is being now rejected by some strong political actors in this region, and some of the citizens are being receptive to that, thinking that for more economic development you need more, you need less democracy, you need less freedom, you need more autocracy. This discourse is gaining some traction in the region, and of course you also have a discourse that say that to be able to fight terrorist activity, to fight insecurity, you need military governments. And I think it is important again for us to have public debates, informed public debate about all those issues, to try to explain to the people that we already have a lot of military and autocratic regimes before. Nigeria is a good example of that. It has not produced security, it has not produced economic and social progress. So the debate about democracy, I think we need to have it with a very nuanced perspective, with a focus on the facts, and also by clarifying the debate. Elections is only a dimension of democracy. At WATI, we really insist on the fact that democracy is just this idea that government for the people and by the people. The way you operationalize that through your institutions, that is something that people still need to think about it. Election is a modality. It is not the only one. We can have other systems, but the very principle of democracy is just this idea that we think that a system where you don't just have a king or you have someone making decisions about your own life. I think most of the young people in the continent, I'm not sure that they want to have their lives being just decided by some autocratic leaders, even a gifted, and honest and very brilliant dictator. And I think it is very important again to accept the debate, to understand that people are working again to really erase the democratic gains in the space that was filled by the civil society in the last 2 or 3 decades in the region. People are working very hard to suppress that. And again, not only in the military-led countries, also in other countries in the region and in the continent. It is very important, I think, for me to insist again on the need for vigilance and again a lot of debate on these issues, because it is the condition of what is going to happen to our kids, to the next generation in West Africa. If we want them to be free, or if we want them to be again under autocratic regimes and under stress.
Well, very interesting commentary there. In closing now, and roughly probably in 90 seconds, if you are able to, I still have like 2 questions for you there within the 90 seconds time span there. We are at the end, like I mentioned, of this interview. So let me ask you 2 short questions, okay? First, between now and 2027, what should our audience be watching for in West Africa? Give them one thing to keep their eye on, that between this period and to 2027, watch out for these things or for that thing. What would those be?
Well, I think, unfortunately, insecurity in the Sahel for me remains a top priority, because there is a lot of uncertainty, and it is important to continue to look at that, because it can change the perspective of the entire region, and it's always very volatile. So that is really one thing. And then the other thing is that it is important to look at what the positive positive things happening, especially what is happening in the area of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. More and more people in the region want to do things that make sense, want to still to build a strong audience again, to accept the debates, to understand that people are working again to really erase the democratic gains in the space that was filled by the civil society in the last 2 or 3 decades in the region. People are working very hard to suppress that. And again, not only in the military-led countries, also in other countries in the region and the continent. It is very important, I think, for me to insist again on the need for vigilance and again a lot of debate on these issues, because it is the condition of what is going to happen to our kids, to the next generation in West Africa, if we want them to be free or if we want them to be again under autocratic regimes and under and under stress.
Well, very interesting commentary there. In closing now, and roughly probably in 90 seconds, if you are able to, I still have like 2 questions for you there within the 90-second time span there. We are at the end, like I mentioned, of this interview. So let me ask you 2 short questions, okay? First, between now and 2027, what should our audience be watching for in West Africa? Give them one thing to keep their eye on, that between this period and to 2027, watch out for these things or for that thing. What would those be?
Well, I think, unfortunately, insecurity in the Sahel for me remains a main top priority, because there is a lot of uncertainty, and it is important to continue to look at that, because it can change the perspective of the entire region, and it's always very volatile. So that is already one thing. And then the other thing is that it is important to look at what's the positive things happening, especially what is happening in the area of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. More and more people in the region want to do things that make sense, want to still to build a strong private sector, but also want to contribute. And I think that is something that has to be followed, encouraged, and we need to know more people who are doing that, so that you have also clear support for this direction. I think strongly that even to respond to insecurity, we need to involve more citizens, including entrepreneurs in this region.
And lastly, sorry, if you could put a single question to Nigeria's leadership, the current president, I think his name is Tinubu, on behalf of the region, not on behalf of Nigerians, but on behalf of the region, and you had the opportunity to sit in front of President Tinubu and you want to ask a question to him, what would that question be for the president of Nigeria?
Well, I think it would be what he thinks about the role that Nigeria can play and can still play, and how to make sure that Nigeria has the diplomacy, just the staff that it needs to be able to work at the regional level and to be impactful. In the last few years, there were even no ambassadors of Nigeria in many countries in the world. That says, I think, told a lot about maybe the reduced ambition of Nigeria at the African stage, at the international stage. We need a strong Nigeria, but we need also a Nigeria that is able to tackle its own problems. Without that, we won't be able to have a Nigeria which is able also to help West Africa generally.
Dr. Giles Yabi, founder of Wati in Dakar, thank you for your time and for your candor. Your presence in this hour makes it an even better hour. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Giles Yabi of Wati in Dakar. And that brings us to the end of episode 11. 2 hours and 2 versions of the same country. In the first hour, a Nigerian arguing with its own numbers, where the fundamentals improve and the household does not feel it, and where the honest answer to why may have less to do with economics than with who is accountable to whom. In the second, a Nigerian that the region cannot stop depending on and cannot quite rely on either. What connects them is a single idea, and it is worth carrying out that idea here. A state that cannot deliver a policy to its own citizens is not going to be able to deliver leadership to its neighbors. The transition and the transmission problem inside Nigeria and the leadership problem across West Africa are not two stories. They are one story, told at two different distances. Many thanks to all three of our guests, to Ms. Ma Amara Ikeruchi of the Center for the Study of Economics of Africa in Abuja, to Professor Bongo Adi of Lagos Business School, and to Dr. Jails Yabi in Dakar. Next Saturday, brothers and sisters in Africa and across the world, we are going to cross the border and go to Cote d'Ivoire. And the timing is not an accident. Cote d'Ivoire marks 66 years of independence on the 7th of August, the day before we go to air. It is the largest economy in Francophone West Africa. It grows the cocoa that a good part of the world eats, and it has spent the years since Civil War rebuilding a speed that impresses almost everybody who visits. And underneath that, there is still an unfinished argument about who counts as an Ivorian, an argument old enough to have a name and a political season ahead in which that argument tends to resurface. So, the question for episode 12 next week is this: can a country grow its way out of a question about belonging, or does the question wait for it? That is episode 12 of 54 Conversations, Cote d'Ivoire, next Saturday. If this hour was worth something to you, the most useful thing you can do is send it to one person who has never thought about Nigeria as a regional actor at all. We are a small independent program here at the Africa Desk Live. There is no network behind us. There's no network behind this. There is no honorarium for people who still come and sit in those chairs across me. They come because they love Africa and they would love to contribute. They love the conversation that matters to all of Africa. That is the fragile way to build something, and it works only if the audience carries that. 54 countries, 54 conversations, 11 down, and we are still going. For the Africa Desk Live, I have been Semantics King and will always be your host here to discuss issues affecting each of the 54 African countries on the continent of Africa. If today was very interesting to you, please do one of two things for us. Share this show with a friend or co-worker, or tell them about the Africa Desk. Here at the show, we are not chasing followers for the sake of following or having followers. That's not our goal. Our goal is to be able to ensure that every single African citizen on the continent is able to listen to this, to watch it, and learn something from it and get a direction for their lives. If just listening to one guest idea on the show can improve the life of a citizen, say in Cotonou or in Benin or in Zimbabwe, in Senegal, in Morocco, in Egypt, anywhere on the continent of Africa. If just listening to, say, for instance, Dr. Yabir, who talked about ECOWAS, if just listening to him will give a citizen, a young boy, a young girl, an idea of how to make his or her life better, is going to make that life better for them. That is what counts and matters for us at the Africa Desk here. Okay? We want every citizen on the continent of Africa to be able to have access to these discussions, to be able to formulate their own ideas, because the desk is for the citizens. It's not for governments. It's not for politicians. It's not for donors. It's not for foreign interests. Okay? In the event that we need to bring a government official here to account, we will try our very best to make sure that happens. And it will only be to respond to accusations, statements, against that politician or against that government official. If we do not see that necessary, if we don't deem that necessary, the only thing we do is we bring the citizens themselves, because the platform is for them. It is their platform. They come here and share ideas because we believe that perhaps the other platforms or maybe mainstream media may not give them that opportunity to be able to impact their lives. That is why we exclusively prepare the show for the citizens. Okay, and the politicians can go to the mainstream media and discuss what they think, and this can be discussed for African citizens. But this show is for the African citizen, for a young boy sitting in Freetown to a little girl who is growing up in Soweto, wanting to make life better and dreaming about the future, about Africa. And if we are talking about Pan-Africanism, we're talking about unity for African countries, where do we sit? How do we make Africa a better continent for each and every citizen? That is what this discussion is about. That is why we were in Nigeria today. Why? Because Nigeria plays a key role. Nigeria is a superpower on the continent of Africa. Nigeria has helped in so many ways on the West African regional level. It has helped in peacekeeping, in leadership, and that is the Nigeria we heard about from inside Nigeria and from around Nigeria. Again, please remember that the show is about you, the African citizen, where you are living in North America, you're living in Europe, or you're living in the Australia region or in Asia. It is your show. If you have an idea and you really want to share that idea, okay, just let us know. You can see our numbers on the screen. Send us a WhatsApp message, send us a text message, or even send an email to us and say, hey, Africa Desk, I am interested in talking about this. And here's the final one I want to leave with you. This act we've started is to go around all 54 countries. That is going to take us into next year, but that is not all to it. We will begin to discuss different issues and different topics around the continent. But this first round, we have to go around each of the 54 African countries so that people know how many countries we have and what these countries are doing. We receive several communications from the audience. One audience member one time communicated to us and say, hey, we really love the show. I did not know that Africa has 54 countries. Debatably, yeah, 54, maybe you could say 55. But that is the reason for the show. An African citizen living in North America admitted that they didn't even know that Africa has 54 countries. That, my friend, my brother, my sister, is why this show is about. To educate and inform the African citizens about the things happening. I know you learned a lot today about Nigeria. You learned a lot today about ECOWAS. Next Saturday, you will be learning a lot about the Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire. So please tune in next Saturday and invite a friend, a relative, a co-worker, so that they can learn while they listen and they can decide for themselves whether Africa is a continent for all of us or is just for a select few. Until next time, my friend and brother and sister, see you Saturday. Have a great weekend and take care of yourself. Semantis King is my name. Bye.
That's the Africa Desk Live with Semantics King Jr. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, follow, or share this with someone who needs to hear it. And join us next week. Same time, same desk. Until then, keep the African heart beating.